Let's turn now to the matter of the environment, as a number of reports were tabled in Ottawa today. They come from this country's environmental commissioner, who says Fisheries and Oceans Canada is moving too slowly in efforts to protect aquatic species. Commissioner Jerry DeMarco joins us now. Commissioner, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here, Michael.
Now, you tabled 6 reports today in the House of Commons, but the one that's really getting the most attention, initially at least, is your report about protecting aquatic species. Now, that report, it basically says that there's a bias against listing species that, while at risk, are not listed as needing protection because they're also commercially viable. What do you mean by that?
Yes, so Canada has a Species at Risk Act, which is meant to protect and recover those species that are in the most trouble. In this case, a few hundred aquatic species, including a couple hundred fish. But Department of Fisheries and Oceans is reluctant to use that legislation to protect those species that have commercial value.
Now, is that definitive? Did you compare that against, for example, non-commercial species?
Yes, we have, in our report, we set out in graphical form the evidence of that bias. Lots of aquatic species that are found in freshwater and are not commercially valuable, easy to have them listed by the department. Those that are predominantly in saltwater and subject to commercial fisheries, very few of those have been listed for protection.
Now, is that a political choice, do you think, or is it the environment taking a backseat to jobs? What is the rationale, do you think, around it?
Well, it looks to us as an example of short-term economics trumping long-term sustainability issues. But our view is that if you take a long-term view, the environmental interests and the economic interests should align, because communities, the fishing fleets and so on, they all rely on a sustainable fish stock, and so does the ecosystem. So it's a case of short-term economic gain trumping long-term sustainability.
I think, though, up against it are things like the memory of what happened to the cod fishery in Newfoundland. How do you address a challenge like that when really people are concerned about what listing something as endangered or in need of protection might actually do to their livelihoods?
Well, that's a great example, because cod has never been listed for protection, and it's been managed solely under the Fisheries Act for decades. And it was under that legislation that the collapse occurred and the mismanagement of the cod fishery occurred. So it can't be used as a reason for not listing it now, because that's an example of a fish that should have been listed, and the science said that it should have been listed. They didn't list it, and the population crashed from 100% to 1%.
Mm-hmm. But if there is this hesitancy to put species that are in need of protection on the list itself, how do you address a challenge like that? Is that a cultural challenge to be addressed within the civil service?
Yeah, it's a matter of getting folks to look at things in a longer term view. And I know there are a lot of pressures, both politically and within the bureaucracy, to discount the future and to focus on short-term deliverables. And there's pressures from communities that are reliant on fishing. But those same communities require long-term sustainable stocks to sustain those communities. So that's what I was saying. The long-term sustainability is the place where economic interests and ecological interests should align.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, that may actually build on another point that you made, because you are also calling out some government departments for failing to do a better job at species protection. What exactly, or rather, which departments are you concerned about? What impact does that lack of specificity actually have on what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, so that's our Sustainable Development Report, and it looks at Fisheries and Oceans, the same one as Aquatic Species Report, plus Environment and Climate Change Canada, plus Parks Canada. So those are the 3 lead agencies in delivering on the Sustainable Development Strategy goal relating to species at risk recovery. And there we're seeing a troubling lack of results, really. 7 to 8 years now, they've been stuck at reaching only about 40% of their target for recovering species at risk. The short-term target is 60%, and the long-term target, of course, is 100% to try to prevent these species from extinction.
So what would you have them do then? Now that you've pointed out the problem, what would you like to see?
Well, there needs to be more of a focus on results and measures to actually protect and recover species. There's a lot of process involved, a lot of deliberations. The fisheries and oceans can take up to 10, 11 years just to decide whether to protect a species or not. In the meantime, the species is in trouble. These are the species that are in the emergency room of biodiversity, just a few hundred out of the tens of thousands of species in Canada. So they need urgent action, and they can't afford long bureaucratic processes that we're seeing now.
Commissioner, thank you for this. Really appreciate the time today.
Thank you.